Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch by interviewing authors, discussing their books, learning about the writing process, and even, on occasion, chatting live with a panel of authors to discuss topics relevant to both readers and writers. My guest today on the Online for Authors podcast is Dani Pettrey, author of the book One Wrong Move. In my book review, I stated that One Wrong Move is a Christian mystery and suspense with a great side of romance. Andy is an ex-FBI because of what the higher-ups called a botched job. She now works as an investigator for an insurance company. After a gallery heist, she meets Christian, a security expert and private investigator who installed the gallery's security system. Immediately, the two find themselves in the middle of some strange game with a thief or thieves who leave riddles for them to find. Unfortunately, the object of the game seems to include the demise of both Christian and Andy. As they dodge one attempt on their life after another, Andy and Christian have to face their feelings for one another as well as the mistakes in their pasts. Will Andy be vindicated? Can Christian convince Andy that he's on the up and up? Or will those intent on killing them win before they know? This is a great read. Today on Online for Authors, I'm chatting with Dani Pettrey, author of One Wrong Move. Welcome, Dani.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you, Terry.
I'm super excited to have you. I loved the book. But before we really dive into the book and you and your writing, can you tell the listeners just a quick summary, an elevator pitch about what this book is about?
Sure. So this book is the first in my Jeopardy Fall series, and it features a family of private investigators who were raised by cons. And so it's their way of giving back. And in One Wrong Move, it focuses on Christian, the one sibling who is a security analyst expert. And when one of the art galleries that he secured they have a heist, he's brought into it with the insurance investigator, whom he clashes with quite a bit. And the two of them are dragged into this heist trail with, coded messages and a killer they can't figure out. And so, yeah, I had a lot of fun writing it.
It sounds like you did. Why thrillers?
Good question. When I started out, I did more romantic adventure. And then I think over time, it just naturally progressed a little more suspense, a little more, thriller. And now, the last series and this one, definitely thrillers, I believe. So I've had a quote and I can't remember if it was Publishers Weekly or Booklist, but one did, all the intensity of a thriller and the happily ever after of a romance. So I kind of try to focus on that, the thriller and the romance.
Right. And I thought that was a cool mix of genres when you think about it, because thrillers are, I normally think of the hide under the bed kind of thing, right? Yes. And romance is like so totally different. Is it hard to mix those two genres and get enough of both?
Yeah,
I would think that the thriller might sometimes make the romance seem cheesy. Like I would be hard, or the romance would, like, I don't know, weaken the thriller part. Like we're all tense and now we're not.
Oh, we're not. It is definitely tricky. I will say that. I've struggled more with the books as they've gravitated more towards a thriller. Right. And so sometimes the thriller is heavier and the romance is a little lighter. And I have to kind of work, like I'm on rewrites right now. And I'm trying to build the romance up, but not take away from the thriller. So it is really interesting. It's interesting combination. I call it happily ever after thrillers, and it's definitely unusual, I think, and trying to figure out those threads can definitely be tricky. I agree 100% because
it just seemed I loved it. I just found it to be like, wow, this is this is an unusual genre mix.
Yeah, it is, because you're right. You could be in a super intense moment and you're like, okay, but now we have the romance. So I think that romance tends to be at like a high intensity, and there needs to be some connection before the story. So it's not like two people meet and then they're like in this huge thriller thing and they're trying to fall in love at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
There has to be something that connects them in some way.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So you say when you got started that you weren't doing thriller, you were doing more what you call romantic adventure. What is different from like a romantic adventure to this romantic thriller? Where does that change?
Yeah, so good question. So my romantic adventure books were more kind of focused on whodunit, a lot of tracking down people out kind of in the wilderness, and they involved like sports like heli-skiing and rock climbing, and like there was a murder victim found when one of the heroines was rock climbing. So it was more whodunit almost in those, with a lot of adventure packed in. And now it's almost, if you think, is the hero going to survive? And so it ups that stakes a little more, I think.
All right. I was wondering, that was one of the things I was going to ask you is have you always written this genre? So the answer is yes and no. You kind of started out what you're doing more on what I'll call thriller romance light. Yes. And now you've moved on to much more of the thriller aspect of it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. You also have a lot of Christian elements in your book. Is that true with all of your series?
Yes. So far that's been true of all my series, and it's different levels depending on the book. So, it's huge. My faith is a big part of my life, so I kind of naturally gravitate to it being part of my characters. The nice thing with my publisher is they never say you have to put this much in, or that's too much or too little. And so I try to just let it work naturally with the characters in the story as to what level it'll be.
Right. I liked the way you just it did feel like you just kind of put it in a way that a person who has faith would be using their faith in a given situation.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, which was a nice way to see that happen. It didn't feel preachy. It just felt this is the way this person handles life situations. When things get tough, they say a little prayer, and that's kind of the way it worked. So I thought that was good.
Yeah, I try not to start with any idea of it in mind when I start, just like I don't start with a theme, and I write the story and just kind of see how it develops. And so hopefully that makes it not forced,
Right. Yeah. Right. So does that mean that you're a pantser and not a plotter?
It means I'm a pantser.
I think you may be the first thriller pantser I have found.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Most of my thriller people, they know where they're going, and they then plan out the plot twists, and then they start writing.
Yes.
And you see where the story goes. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah. I've done a lot of classes, like through Thriller Fest and different places. And you're right. They all plot. All the ones that I've taken plot the whole way through. And I tried a little bit with One Wrong Move, and I ended up writing down like maybe 8 little things that happened. Like it didn't go super outlined for me. I did go a little more this time, but it always gravitates away from it. So I'm like, I might as well just start writing it. You know what I mean?
So as a fellow pantser, I understand that, because when I first got started, I thought that to truly be an author, one had to outline. And so therefore what I was doing was not right. And so I tried to outline. And I feel like my characters stand on the side of the room with their arms crossed and say, no, we're not going to participate in this. You let us know when you're done doing your thing, and then we'll tell you how the story's going.
Yes, that's so true. That's really a good way to put it. It's very true.
Yeah, I just feel like my characters have a mind of their own, and what they want to do is far more exciting than what I've come up with.
Right.
My logical brain is very stuck in a particular world, and apparently my creative brain, when I allow it to access it, it's got a lot of cool things that are going on in there. And when I'm outlining, I'm not accessing that creative part.
Agreed. I agreed. There was a big difference because I did try to outline one wrong move and it ended up kind of going its own way anyway. So I thought that was kind of a lot of time to do something that didn't really end up
help.
happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel the same way, but I am so surprised because I wondered if maybe it had more to do with genre. Like people who gravitate toward thriller would be naturally someone who would plot. And here we have someone who naturally gravitates toward thriller and doesn't do that. I think that's amazing. And it actually gives me a little hope because I have ideas for other genres and have wondered, well, maybe it won't really work because I'm a pantser and that's going to be a very difficult thing. And it's like, well, maybe not.
No, maybe not.
Maybe
I
not.
think you could probably do any genre of pantsing, it just a different way to approach it, but it's how it works for you. So
right.
Yeah.
I love that. Did you have a lot of research that you had to do for this book?
I did do quite a bit of research for this book. On private investigators, on con men, on scams, on, being raised by a con man. And then for the book itself, heists, security systems, insurance investigators. I love research, so I have to limit myself or I'll just keep going.
I wrote a writing tip recently that was don't get caught in the rabbit hole.
There you go.
Because it's very easy for those of us who like to research, because I too love research. I call myself a research junkie, that you can go down those rabbit holes and it's very interesting and it's very satisfying and it can very much keep you from writing.
It can, very much. Yeah.
And so you have to kind of say, when do you have enough?
Right. Exactly. Because if you keep going, a lot of it doesn't make it in the book anyway. Right.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. In fact, I did a World War II book and I know a lot about World War II that did not end up in that book because it didn't need everything.
Right.
We're not writing a textbook. You were not writing a textbook on security systems to avoid heists.
Right. Exactly. Right? You just need to know enough so the reader understands and you can move forward with the story. So
right. And sometimes you learn those salient points that help you move the story forward. It's like, oh, this is how they would get around that. And that will make the perfect way for this to happen in this story.
Exactly. Right? Exactly. Yes.
So do you do all your research up front or do you do it along the way as well? How does that work for you?
So I usually do research at the beginning and I'll limit myself maybe to, a month max. Sometimes it's a few weeks, depending how much I feel like starting a series takes longer. So
Right.
And then I start writing. I don't do any research during my first draft. I'll put brackets that say research. And then when I read through it and I get ready to do my second draft, I'll do research again.
Yeah. I often, if I'm writing, like that's where I am. You put brackets, I highlight in yellow and I'll just put like XXX and highlight in yellow. And I know when I come back that what am I supposed to do here? Oh, I didn't know what that was called, or I didn't know how to describe that, or I didn't. Yeah. And then I go back and do more too.
So do you do multiple drafts too, since you're a pantser?
Yeah. So I do a first draft that I call it word vomit. I'm essentially letting the story out into the real world and I get it down on paper. It's not anything I would ever let anyone see. I don't worry about wordsmithing it. I don't worry about descriptives. I just get the story out. My dialogue tends to be okay at that point because that's a lot of my story, but it's flat at that point and it's usually not long enough. Because that's just, I'm not really good with descriptives. And so I skip them completely in my first draft. And so then I have to go back and say, okay, so they want to know where we are. We really need to add that in here, Terry.
We need something. I tell you.
And then what I do is I usually let it sit and I don't look at it for several weeks. And then I pull it up again and just read it through and I take notes while I'm reading. And it's like, oh, I'm going to have to add something here and this isn't good enough. And, what was that? And, all my notes. And then I usually let it sit again And then I go back and I start adding things in from those notes. And then, I
Yep.
have a bazillion drafts. I mean, that's
Yes.
just the way it goes for
You
me.
sound
So,
like you write exactly like me. I do the same thing. Mine, I
yeah.
call it my raw draft that
Yeah.
nobody can read.
Right.
Yeah. And
Right.
it's like half the length of my final book.
Yeah. So you're like me. I
Mhm.
get the story out, but it doesn't mean that it is the whole story.
Yes.
It's the beginning, the middle, the end. It's the salient points.
Mm-hmm.
But there's going to be more to
Yeah.
it. We're going to learn more about the characters and other things that I just don't put
Mm-hmm.
in that first draft. And I don't worry about weak words and too many
Oh, no.
adverbs. And I mean,
Right.
I just the way I think, and it just
Yeah.
comes out on the page.
Yeah.
So,
Same.
yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I love meeting other people that both are similar to me and then are very different from me. And then
Mm-hmm.
finding out that we come up with books that are good books to read,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's more than one pathway to a good book.
There is. Very
right?
much so. Yes.
So I've had people tell me that do the plotting, that what I'm doing is what they would call reverse plotting. So I put my story down and then I work the plot into it, because if there's plot points missing or
Right.
other things, I'm adding them in those other drafts, and that they do that work on the front end, so that when they write it, they write a more polished, like their first draft is
Oh,
much more polished.
okay. That makes sense.
But
Right.
they also spent all of that time working
Mm-hmm.
out all of these plot issues, whereas I
Mm-hmm.
kind of go back and work them out.
That makes sense. Reverse plotting. I've never heard that, but
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. And so I think that in general, I think people plot. Just when do you do it and how do you do it?
Exactly. That's very true. Yeah, because going into the next draft, I'm planning out what I'm going to put in to get it in there. So
Right.
I think it's just
Right.
having that fun first draft that
Yes. I like to be a little more open. And like I said, when I'm plotting, I don't believe I'm using my creative brain.
Right. I agree.
I'm in list making mode.
Exactly. Yes.
And list Terry and author Terry are two different Terrys. I tell everyone I live my life I've got lists everywhere, and I know what I need to do and my time, and I'm just, I get everything done. And then author Terry is, don't tell me when to write, don't tell me how to write, don't tell me what to write,
Right. Exactly. Yep. I feel you.
Yeah. It's like, multiple personality Terry. So
Right.
So when you're writing your characters, how much of yourself are you putting in these characters?
It's a good question. I only put a very small amount in my characters of me. Like one character in my first series was very much like me. But now it's like they might have little quirks that I have, or they might do things a certain way, but otherwise they're not too much of me. But I will say other characters will have parts of like my husband's personality or somebody I know, or this might be fun from, a little bit about my daughter, or, there's always
Right.
something in there.
Right. I think maybe the more you write, the more characters you write, the further you get from yourself, because you've already written yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a great point. Absolutely.
I'm on book number 3, and my characters, there's still quite a few. There's quite a bit of me in my main characters, but not as much in this third book as the first book.
Interesting. I think that you're right with that. It's just I'm on 13 just came out.
Yeah. And so after 13 variations, nobody wants to read the same book over and over. And I'm only one person.
Exactly.
Right?
That's true. Yeah.
So you start reaching out and you say, my husband would make a good character.
Right.
My mother would make a good character. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Take little things, or that sense of humor would be awesome in this character.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Let's see. So I know that you do the series.
Yes.
How many series do you have out right now? Is this your 4th?
This is my 4th. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I really enjoy writing series. I kind of create a cast of characters, and I'd like them to each have a book. So I have 4 siblings in this series, so there'll be 4 books. So it kind of goes by the number of main characters.
So each of your books then, so the next book that we have, Christian will be in it, but he will not be the main thrust of the book.
Correct. Okay. Absolutely. Yep. The siblings stay in the books, but it switches to focus on a different one for each book.
And is that true with all of your series then?
Yes.
That's the way you do that? Okay.
Yep.
I know a lot of people that do the series where the same main character shows up in each one.
Yes.
I would get bored. I'm afraid I would get bored. I tend to get bored, and I like to switch things up, and I have trouble imagining, well, what would I do with what would I even do? I've been asked, oh, will you make another series with that one? And it's like, no, I wrap that up.
Yeah, I know. I mean, sometimes I think, oh, how fun to write a Kinsey Milhone or a, Stephanie Plum. But I think for me as an author, I think it would be hard to keep coming up with story ideas.
Yeah.
I mean, they've done a great job, but me as an author, I think, oh, I don't know how long I would go with that, because you're not really changing professions or, locations normally, or you're kind of in the same place. So
yeah, and I think I think people do a good job of it, but as a reader, I tend not to read series that go on and on and on and on, because as I'm reading, I'm thinking, what's the likelihood that this chick found her 7th dead body?
Yes.
I mean, and that's
it's just very true.
It's just a me thing, because I know other people who love series, and it's because they've really loved this character and they just want to see her do her thing again.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I tell people too, is, there's books out there for everyone, no matter what kind of reader you are. Yes. You want a good long series, there are people who do that. You want new characters every time, there are people who do that too. So
absolutely. Yeah. There's a show we watch based off of a series of books, and it's a small town sheriff. And I'm like, man, there are a lot of dead bodies in that town for being such a small town.
Yeah. Like, I think maybe I'd move.
I know.
The odds are pretty bad.
I thought there'd be other cases besides dead bodies, but it's always a dead body. And it's a lot in a little town. So
I know. Yeah. I think that's, but like I said, I think that different readers, and authors want to do different things.
Agree.
I do a book and I tire of my characters pretty quickly. And, I need to be quiet so they don't hear that when I say it, because I'm in the middle of a book and I don't want her to get angry with me. But, but once I'm done, I really do. I wrap things up and it's like, oh, good. Now I can move on. I've gotten that character out of my head, and I've made room for the next one that's, been banging around back there that I wouldn't let out of the back room. So
exactly. That happens partway through a book, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm writing one right now. I'm about 40,000 words in, and I have another story that is percolating, and I have to keep saying, shh, we're not there. Yeah. I'm not even close to there right now. So you just,
exactly. It happens partway through for me too, where I'm just like, I'm still enjoying what I'm doing, but all of a sudden this other story is just pressing.
Can't
get there yet. So,
and sometimes I even have to go so far as to write a few little notes down, and then say, okay, now see, I've put it down, and I'll be back to you.
Yes, I do the same thing.
So go away.
Right.
move out of my space for just a few moments, right?
Yeah. It's amazing how the creative brain works.
It is. I tell people all the time I sound like maybe I'm crazy and need to be on medication, because I have voices that talk in my head, and but
that's part of it. My daughter is a marketing strategist and virtual assistant, but it's all within the publishing industry. And sometimes she'll go, writers are just crazy, Mom. And I'm like, you knew that going in, right?
Yes,
you have a writer for a mom. She's like, yeah, I knew that going in. So she's like, you're the craziest. Most are pretty good. And I'm like, thank you, Kayla. So
thank you.
Thank you for that. But she's like, it's a very different world for authors. And I said, yes, it is very different.
It's just because, I feel like I'm very grounded in the real world, but when I'm writing, I am no longer grounded in the real world.
No.
I am transported somewhere else. I don't even really feel like me. And sometimes I'll read what I wrote and I'll think, oh, Oh
I wrote
my,
that,
I
right?
wrote that? Or I was reading one time, so I type. I don't write
Mhm,
in longhand, and I was
mhm.
typing. It was coming up on the screen, and I'm reading it. So like my reading brain is about what, a second behind my
Yeah,
writing brain,
yeah.
and I got to a certain point and actually said out loud, "Oh, oh my!" And then I thought, "You idiot! You just
You
wrote
wrote it.
it." But it's like they don't talk,
Right, right.
you
No,
know?
that's so funny. That it's
Yeah.
very true. And my family will come up to me if I'm in the middle of writing, and they'll ask me something, and I'm like, "I'm in story world. Like my brain's not going to go there right now. Ask me
Right.
that when I'm done,
Ask me that
because
later. And
I'm in
sometimes I
story
don't even
world."
hear it. Like
Yeah.
like I turn and it's like, "What?
When did you come in?
Yeah, what? Are you speaking English to me? Like,
Right.
what?" Where do you like to write? Do you write in your home? Do you have to go
Mhm.
somewhere? Do you have any routines that you follow?
Sure. So normally I write at home. I get up early before everybody else is up. It's just quiet. I write my best. Usually I'm at my desk by 5:30, and I just love to write in the morning when it's quiet. I get my word count or page count done before lunch, and that's kind of how that goes. But my
Mhm.
favorite place to write is the beach. So
Yeah.
when I'm on deadline, I usually go to the beach or a friend's beach house and work really long hours,
Yeah.
um, but I just write so much better there. I think the distractions are away, but it's also just a soothing place. So I'll sit
Right.
out on the deck and write.
I am a beach person as well, so I
Yeah.
understand the beach idea. Water in general, there's just something about the
Right?
sound and the
It's
movement of the
soothing.
water, and,
Yeah.
um, but I do my best work anywhere but my own home.
Interesting.
Now, I can work here at home, and I do work here at home, but working away from home means that the laundry doesn't bother me, and who
Yes.
needs to be fed isn't
Yes.
bothering me, and whether
Yeah.
the dog needs to go out is not bothering me.
Very
And
true.
the 100 million other little chores on my list are not bothering me. And
Yeah.
like you, then I can sit for hours.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
can sit and write for hours and hours and hours. I
Yeah.
love going to writers' retreats
Yes.
where there's nothing to do but write. Like it is
Exactly.
they don't have any of the formal, you need to get together for classes, none of that. Just
That's right.
here's a space for you to write, and I can get
Yeah.
so much done in a week to 10 days
Right? Yes.
that I
Absolutely.
can't do the same at home.
Yep, I run a
Yeah.
few writer retreats, and the
Do you?
one yes, and I usually do them where I live, but, I was invited to do one in Texas, but part of it is just gonna be that writing time. Like,
Yeah.
we will have some classes, but then it's like, you just get this time to go outside by the water or, beautiful area or wherever you wanna go and just write for
Yeah.
hours, you know?
Yeah.
So,
I love that ability. And I think part of it is that it's hard to turn off what's going on in the real life around you. It's
yes,
not like an
very
office job that you go in at 9 and you clock in and then you clock out
right,
at 5. So you're
right.
working in a home office and home is still going on around you,
It
you
is,
know?
absolutely, very true,
So,
yeah. My office is in, like, a bump out sunroom,
mhm,
and so it faces the wall of windows, so in some ways, I just ignore everything going on around
right,
me, face
right.
forward, but it is. The only thing I have problems writing, like, in coffee shops is I'm so distractible, I'll start hearing what people are saying, sometimes I type what people are saying by accident, and I'm like, "Whoops." So, yeah.
Yeah, I've tried coffee shops. I can do it for a little while.
Okay.
I think it maybe depends where I am
In the
in the
story.
writing process and in the story and how, is it more of a glossy thing that I'm doing, or is it
Mhm.
something I need to be deeper? Because if I
Sure.
need to really be deep inside of myself, I'm probably going to get distracted.
Yeah.
And then I love to people watch. And
Yeah.
so, I'm watching them thinking that would be a good character. I wonder,
Right?
you
I
know,
know.
I
I
wonder
love to
what
do
they're
that
up to,
too. Yeah. My husband's like, "Stop doing that." I'm like, "I'm a writer. That's what we do. We
That's what we
observe."
do. We can't help it. We
No,
do it
we
without even
cannot.
knowing we're doing it.
Exactly.
So, I live at the beach and
Oh,
I go
lucky
to the
you.
yeah, I go to the beach quite often, and people watching at the beach is a very amusing thing.
Yeah.
It's very amusing. People assume, I think, when they're at the beach that no one else is paying any attention to them. And you see a lot of things.
Yes, that's true. Just from beach visits, I imagine you do. Yes, that's funny.
Another thing that I think is funny is there is a pier, and there's a camera on the pier, and they have that camera live 24/7, like on a YouTube channel where you can just go and look and whatever. Yeah. Well, people will park their things right in view of this camera. They either don't know it's there or they forget it's there, and then you see all kinds of things that no one would do on a camera.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh my goodness, it's up on YouTube. So
yes, and it's like, live feed for everyone, and it's like, oh my gosh. Goodness. But
now pay attention for cameras, right?
Seriously. So I mean, you think people of Walmart is a good thing. Let me tell you, people of the beach would make another one. So
all right. Good to know. I'll have to start paying more attention on the beach.
Definitely at piers, because they often have those cameras, and just They do it so that like, if you're a fisherman, you can go on and see what, like, how big the waves are and that kind of thing. It
makes sense.
But yeah, it can be pretty funny. It can be.
That's hilarious.
So what is next for you?
Yes. So I am finishing the revisions on book 2.
Okay.
They're due July 3rd. So I am doing one of the sister stories, and that will be out in the next spring.
Okay.
And I'm excited about it. And then I'll jump into book 3. So
do you have any idea where you're going to go when this series is done? Because you said it's a 4.
Yep. I have no idea.
Nothing.
Usually after about the 3rd, like when I'm on not the last one, second to last one, my brain starts churning new stories. I'm like, okay, I need to be done with the series. I got stuff going. So
yeah. You're like me too with that. You got to keep it reined in, because otherwise, what are you going to do with all of that?
Exactly.
It's like we're not in story mode right now.
No.
We're finishing up what we've got here.
Exactly. Yes.
Wonderful. Well, Dani, if someone wanted to get up with you and talk with you about one of your series or about your writing life, how do they do that? What's the best way to reach you?
Great question. So my website, danipettrey.com, has a contact email, and it'll come right to me. Love to email with readers. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, and I have a Facebook readers group called the Suspense Squad, and I spend most of my time online there. So it's a great way to chat.
Fantastic. And I'll have all that in the show notes so that anyone who wants to know, they'll be able to find it. Is there anything you wish I had asked you about that we didn't bring up today?
I don't think so, but it was so fun seeing how we write so similar.
I know. I love that. I love that. It makes me feel like you and I should get together and do a writer's retreat together. We'd have fun.
We would. And you're at the beach, so that's a good place for it.
Yeah, it would be great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Dani, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. I appreciate all your time. So it was lovely meeting you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.